Good afternoon, lovely people. How nice to see you again.
Welcome to Earth.
Welcome to Earth.
Yes. That piece you were reading, Robert, what was that from?
I just found it this morning while I was going through stuff. I went online. It's a PDF that NASA's put out on this film from 1970. And what they're doing is they're talking about radiation and fogging. It's only about 7-8 pages, right? So when I was reading this, they were actually talking about what should we do with this film on the command module. So they take all their pictures, they load it onto the LEM, they bring it over to the command module, load everything in there, and then they start heading back to Earth. Well, what should we do? Should we place this in a lead container or shouldn't we place it in a lead container? And then before they take off, they're discussing the same thing. Well, should we store this in a lead container or shouldn't we store this in a lead container? And this kind of argument goes on for about half a page. Space radiation hazards to photographic film.
So it looks like they were fully aware that there could be problems.
Oh, yes. That's May 1969, and it's done by C.W. Hill and N. Davis and H.K. Parker. This one's Lockheed Georgia Company.
Okay, let's have a look at that. Because if it was May 1969, that is after Apollo 8 and Apollo 10. So they must have been aware there was a problem.
It's interesting because you realize that on board they had all those irradiated space rocks with them. They probably just set the film on top of that box.
Yeah.
Or maybe they put the film in with the rock box. Who the hell knows? And of course that they maintained the full vacuum. That's the most incredible piece of material they had, was the box they carried the rocks back in. Because it's just an aluminum suitcase basically. And they claimed that that was the full vacuum, 10 to the minus 11, inside that container. It didn't collapse. And they maintained that vacuum pressure for 50 years and then opened one up for the 50th anniversary. That's the most amazing thing.
Yeah, well, another amazing thing is that the AAP film degradation problem encompasses several challenging aspects. The free space radiation environment must be estimated for the particular orbit parameters of interest. This radiation must then be transported through a conglomerate structure to a particular film. Finally, the effects of the penetrating radiation upon the film must be assessed. This study concentrates upon the second phase of the problem, radiation transport through the complex configuration using the LSVDC-4 program system. Phase 1 specification of the radiation environment is based upon the VET model of the trapped radiation belts and is provided by J.W. Watts and M.O. Burrell of Space Science Laboratories SSL MSFC. Phase 3 radiation effects upon film is evaluated for the Apollo telescope mount, ATM films, and is based upon data analysis of Kodak and SSL. But here's another thing.
Let's ask Marcus this. Marcus, how fast do you have to orbit the moon in order to maintain lunar orbit?
About 6,000 miles an hour.
Yes, well, according to Faze and his cronies, they say 3,600 miles an hour. And I went and I had a look at it, and every article says 3,600 miles an hour, give or take a few miles per hour.
Which means it takes 2 hours to go around the moon.
All right,
60 miles at 6,000 miles an hour, and they orbit every hour. And then the communication range was 22 minutes out of that hour.
Yes, so anyways, we went and had a look at this, and it is actually true. It is 6,000 miles per hour to make one orbit. Now, if they didn't make that orbit and they're going at 3,600 miles per hour, their orbit's going to decay and decay and decay, and they're going to hit the ground eventually.
Or rapidly.
Not going fast enough to maintain orbit speed.
Yeah.
No, so one fella in the comments section said, I love your videos, but make sure you guys get it right because there's no way. That's 3,600 miles per hour, not 6,000. And I went back and corrected him, and that was the end of it. Oh. But anyways, now you watch, because Faze has just jumped on Jera for an article that he wrote a few years ago, and he got it all wrong. and Jared told him to go back and remove that video because he has it all wrong. Will he? I doubt it.
No, of course not. It's amazing how wrong they get things, these guys. And yet they insist they're right all the time. We don't insist we're right all the time, but we're normally quite accurate.
You see, I told one fella, I said, what is the name of this show? Well, you're the Apollo Detectives. And I go, no, it's called the Apollo Discussions. So I would appreciate it if you went over to Phases and NASA Psychopaths channel and tell them it's a discussion. It's not saying the Apollo Detectives and we're right all the time. It's called the Apollo Discussions for a reason. We discuss it. We're like news people. We bring out the news. There's all these articles. Things change. They're rewriting history, basically, is what they're doing. And you can chalk it up to the Mandela effect. I don't know what you want to call it, but they're slowly sneaking these things in there. Now it's 6,000 miles an hour has gone down to 3,600 miles per hour, but they don't tell you, oh, wait a minute, that's 2 hours to make 3,600, but it's 6,000 to make one revolution, lunar orbit, or else the gravity is going to pull you down. But you think they'll say that? No, they'll just say you're wrong.
Interesting. So what was the response when you said that?
I haven't got one yet. We're still waiting.
I doubt you will get one.
The problem is they're trying to throw a monkey wrench into every piece of physics that was calculated by the original Apollo program. That's the trans-lunar injection speed. Well, it took 3 days to get there. You have to be traveling at a certain speed to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. And now it's 6 days. You can't escape the Earth's gravity if you're doing that. And I don't care. You're just going to have to use fuel the entire way.
Yeah, but they're claiming it's the scenic route. Well, we're going to take the scenic route and go around the moon in 2 hours. Well, it's not going to be a scenic route very long when you're flattened onto the surface.
Yeah.
Also, if you take twice as long to get there, you're going to be spending a whole lot more time in the Van Allen belts, aren't you?
You are, yeah. And in the radiation beyond them.
Plus the consumables, if it's a manned spaceflight, is going to be incredible to do that. So now you got to go back and work out how much more weight you're going to have.
If radiation was such a problem as it is now, back in the Apollo age, then what they should have done to prove it was take those astronauts, I don't care, 2 of them, 3 of them, and place them inside of that Artemis 1 vehicle and then send it to the moon. Instead of putting 3 dummies in there, put 3 real dummies in there and send them off to the moon. Because I'll tell you something, if that worked in 1969, it's going to work today.
Exactly. Not to mention the fact when they update the windows and start putting material inside of the windows, they don't understand that that's all fine and dandy. They did it for one. They didn't do it for the space helmets, because if you're going to add that protection in one window, you're going to have it on the LEM as well. They haven't updated the PDF files. Come on, NASA, get there. You got to update everything. You can't just do one file. You have to be updated. If you're going to update the damn windows and put a bunch of stuff in that makes it so damn brittle, even tempered glass is 5 times stronger. Laminated tempered glass is incredibly strong by comparison to what you now claim is in those windows. Okay, the stuff is brittle as hell. You know, little micrometeor is just going to shatter the stuff. It's not tempered. I mean, it has to be as strong as the windshield in an aircraft, for Christ's sakes. And if you change the material construction of that window that makes it as brittle as anything, when you start adding metals to glassware, like lead crystal glass, it's very delicate. And that's basically what they've done. And if they put aluminum in there, look at Jarrett when we had him on talking about the effect of metal material creating the rays and actually accelerating the cosmic rays into microwaves and X-rays.
But Scott, look at Artemis. I believe Artemis has even more windows than the Apollo CM did. Well, the windows themselves are the only thing that isn't covered.
Well, the mannequins need to have a good view of the Earth. Unfortunately, those mannequins didn't bring a camera with them to take a picture of the Earth, right?
The mannequins didn't bring a picture.
If you're going to have the windows open for the mannequins to look out, they might as well put a camera on there so the mannequins can take the picture, because they certainly can't have a human in there taking the pictures. So they would die. We can say anything as ridiculous as it sounds, and it still makes more sense than NASA. They got to get busy and update their PDF files. They just can't do one. They have to, where it's being discussed in multiple PDF files, it has to be consistent.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I'm looking out the glass right now, so you could see out there. Actually, it's the re-entry. Everything's covered but the glass itself. Yeah.
It's a very interesting document, this one, about the radiation. I think the actual testing was probably accurate. But what did they do when they found that radiation was damaging the film?
Now we're back to fogging.
Yep.
The film did just about exactly what it did when I put that little test subject outside the microwave and opened the door and blasted it for a second.
Yep, same sort of thing.
Is that on page 20, film degradation?
Oh, yeah, they even have the charts, everything.
Yeah, it's funny. This is their special film they're talking about.
Oh, the special film that nobody can find.
This must be the special film that's having these problems.
Well, where was it? Was it inside or outside?
Well, the camera was outside.
Yeah. So what does ATM camera actually stand for?
Apollo Telescope Mount is ATM.
Because you see, now they're calling this a telescope mount, a solar telescope mount built into the space frame of the Apollo lunar module, is what they're saying here. Oh, look at this. They also used it on Skylab.
Ah, it's interesting. Well, Skylab's quite different from Apollo.
Yes.
Yeah, well, if you go to page 29 in the PDF, you will see table 4-2 radiation dose estimates on the ATM. And these are just estimates. I mean, if they were doing it, then they would have the actual data. But this is just considered an estimate at 215 nautical miles.
Yeah, but this is something else, because when you look at page 25, the ATM film doses and radiation fogging densities continued. So obviously they're having problem with radiation fogging on all of these films, whether it's the Pan-X or the SO375 or the SWR. There's fogging here.
Yeah, there is, definitely.
Yeah, but like I said, they're claiming these are estimates at 215 miles. What kind of a test is that? If it's an estimate, it means they didn't do it. It's just a rough calculation. If they actually were doing it at 215 miles, then they would have the actual data for 215 miles, not an estimate.
Is that 210-mile orbit height, is that above the moon or above Earth?
Earth.
So it's below the Van Allen belt?
Oh, well below. Yeah, it's just estimate in their testing.
Well, it's a ridiculous test. If it's above Earth, it can't possibly record any equivalent radiation exposure in lunar orbit.
Well, yeah, there's absolutely no protection. I mean, they're getting a full-on blast from the sun. Never mind all the solar flares that they pretended didn't exist.
Yeah, I like this other one here, though, right above it there on page 23, you know, how it says, no attempt has been made to include temperature-induced film darkening, which may be significant for some films.
That means it was a simulation.
They're trying to extrapolate what they found in Earth orbit.
If they didn't use other procedures and take in everything that's under effect, then that means it's a simulation.
Yeah, it is.
If they're actually there, that all of those factors would be involved in that film. That's what that is. Well, I like how they've got all the different types of film here.
Yeah, they did. Yep, Pan-X is a standard film. I've used it.
Well, high altitude film was only for 12,500 feet. It's got nothing to do with going into space with it.
Yeah. 12,500 feet is lower than Mont Blanc, highest mountain in the Alps in Europe. Not very high at all. At least they acknowledge that there can be radiation fogging on photographic film. But this is only measured in Earth orbit, which is really not the place to measure it if you're going to go to the moon. Maybe that's why they never went, because the film wouldn't record anything. Oh, dear. Sorry, NASA. You've got to get better than this. You really have.
If you look at page 37 in the document, this is talking about the Lockheed Space Vehicle Dose Calculator, Fortran 4, and everything is a test. These are all simulation tests that they're talking about doing. Sitting on Earth, calculating dose of radiations.
Yeah, because they hadn't measured that properly by that time. This is May 1969.
Everything's a test.
Yeah, it is. The geometry test program is an essential adjunct to the geometry program in that it provides computer assistance in checking geometric input data.
Yeah, and that computer would take up a few 1,000 pounds of equipment in a fair-sized room.
I mean, obviously, the people who did this, who wrote up this document, were doing their best to provide information to NASA about what they thought the testers thought would have happened.
Well, of course, they'd be trying to do tests on all kinds of stuff. This is just another testing program on the film.
Right, yes, I understand that. But our testing program and Bill Demos's testing program both indicated and clearly showed that the film either fogged or the color was destroyed.
Yeah.
Well, they're basically saying the same thing here. Actually, I'm looking to see what the actual results were of the test, and they don't give that.
And they don't give any indication as to what they did to correct some of the problems the test identified, i.e. the fogging on the film. There's no indication as to what they did as a result of finding that.
Well, I've always said that. Where's the PDF that showed that everything worked out fine and it had no effect?
Exactly. Good point.
Okay, NASA, you now have to update this file.
And make sure you use the right typeface when you do it.
And a follow-up to it saying all the problems you encountered here were corrected with your new magic film.
They've heard of it, but they can't find it. So surely you've got a few rolls of that film left, NASA.
Yes, but one person, I believe, said that they could obtain 10 rolls, but it's wickedly expensive.
That's why they can't obtain it.
Ah.
You know, saying you can obtain it. Oh, and if you're going to follow it up, get one roll of film and show that it works.
NASA should just offer it for free to anybody that questions it so that it can be tested.
NASA don't dare do that because that will acknowledge that maybe some of their original reports were not as accurate as we have been led to believe.
Some?
Sorry. I get your point.
Some of their data could be incorrect.
Page 35 in the document, the ATM/rack configuration is illustrated in figures B3 and B4. The weight is computed for each volume element in a mathematical model of the ATM, that's the Apollo telescope, and is checked against a detailed weight statement. The ATM model weighs 15,171.2 pounds. That's about 7 tons, compared to the weight total statement of 18,504 pounds. That's 9 tons. You're taking a telescope that weighs the best part of the whole weight of the module. What are they on about? 82% of the actual mass is included in the model. A large part of the missing weight is structure. Approximately 9,000 pounds of the 2,102.6 pounds of the structure is not modelled. Why not?
Wow, and they used this on Skylab as well.
Yeah. Approximately half of the missing 900 pounds could be modelled if the necessary information were available. Oh, goodness. They weren't even given the right information.
I like what it says here just above it. It is identical to the first configuration, except that the LM-ATM rack is not present. This is what gets me right after that. The primary purpose of this study is to assess the radiation hazards to the ATM film. That's the number one thing that they're worried about here.
So they knew there would be radiation damage.
Once again, when you read that piece there, and it's saying a large part of the missing weight is structure. You were talking about all that many tons of weight, right? So they're missing, another 900 pounds of the structure is not modeled, which means, again, it's a simulation. Because you're going to need the structure to mount that if you're actually going to use it. Unbelievable. They can't be running around lifting that much for a telescope. If you want to take a measurement on it, there's an actual ladder there, so you've got 8 inches per rung on the right-hand side, so you see just how big that piece of equipment is.
So that's what they refer to as weighing 18,000 pounds. That'd be about right.
And it does say Apollo telescope mount rack. Now, where's the telescope going to go?
Yeah, where is it?
That looks an awful lot like the descent stage of the LEM, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But not the wiring on it.
This particular one was to be mounted to Skylab.
So on page 38 in the PDF, you've got a similar picture there. The Lunar module, Apollo telescope mounting -rack mock-up. And that appears to be below the ascent stage, which has got the 4 thruster rockets.
This has nothing to do with Apollo. They're just calling it the Apollo telescope.
Still has the same problem with the film.
You see, they say that it was both used on the Apollo missions and on Skylab 3.
Ah,
This document was made in 1969, final report. Okay, well then how does Skylab get in this report then?
If it is in the report, that means that they were already on good terms with Russia to develop this.
the cooperation with Russia was the Apollo-Soyuz link-up, which was 1975.
Look on page B3, would that be page 38? It shows it. The top part of the LEM is sitting on it. That whole thing is the Apollo telescope mount. What is the top of a LEM doing mounted to that thing?
It's a mock-up of the LEM,
Yes, a mock-up.
but it is the LEM.
It's got the 4 thruster panels and the antenna to the right of them.
Yeah, everything's the right shape, included the round fuel tanks on the right and left side.
Yeah,
This is a mock-up. The question remains, why would they put a LEM on top of this thing and then not fly it around the Earth to see if this works?
That shows you that this thing is as large as the descent stage of the lander,
yeah. It's the same shape as the descent stage.
especially the arms coming out for the legs. Like the support arms are exactly the same spot as the descent stage.
But regardless of what this is used for and what it is and what all the PDF says or what all the photographs say, the purpose of this article was to take a mathematical model of the AAP cluster geometry and then to take a look at space radiation doses to the Apollo telescope mount, photographic film, and other experiment film throughout the cluster. Radiation fogging density is estimated for the ATM film, and film degradation is found to be within tolerance limits, is what they're claiming. But the point is there's still radiation fogging happening.
Yeah, they say on page 40 how much the 330 pounds weight of cables and wiring on the rack are omitted. It is not feasible to simulate much of the dispersed wiring. Because of the homogenization of boxes leads to optimistic shielding estimates, while omission of cabling leads to conservative shielding estimates. These two factors will compensate each other to some degree. How do you know that? Where's the test? And only 385.4 pounds of the 922.9 pound gimbal system is modelled. The lost weight is not important for shielding purposes because it is concentrated in a small region already shielded by other massive components. Oh, dear, dear. They're making excuses.
I'm looking at that on page 40 or 48 in the PDF. All the other stuff that's being omitted in their testing. This goes on and on and on. All was a simulation. It's a dummy model. It says it's a dummy model. And we'd like to see the PDF where the tests were actually complete in actual conditions. Okay, because when you read a PDF like that, it means nothing. It means they built a dummy. And they're still putting dummies and stuff and sending it off.
Yeah.
I was talking about Don Pettit, by the way, just in case.
Well, I hope he gets back home again.
Well, it's funny that he can go up and back, no problem, yet other people are stranded there.
Yeah, they're still there, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but if there's people stranded and they have a vehicle, do you think they could bring the other people back? The PDF file that needs to show up is the one that showed the actual test results. And then one following that showed how all of those problems were resolved.
That's why so many of the NASA fanboys quoting these sort of documents claim that it was all no problem at all. They'd sorted it. If you read the documents, they haven't sorted it. The documents are contractors' testing of equipment, and they left it up to NASA to decide what to do about it. It can be confusing for people who are not fully aware of how NASA works.
Yes, unfortunately, imagine a company spending the last 55 years defending a statement that they have made and to date haven't had any conclusive material that resolves the problem, whether they fake something or not. $20 billion a year going into it. And the only current technology is by private contractors.
Yeah, the contractors wanted to get paid, so they produced what NASA wanted to hear.
Isn't it amazing how Boeing was the big company backbones behind the Apollo program? Look at what happens today when they try to send any of their ships up to the space station. They don't even make it there without having the astronauts' lives in peril. And yet these guys were supposed to have been one of the major players, the key players in the Apollo missions. And yet today they can't even make a ship that makes it to the space station without leaking. Come on. We were going to have a little chat about these people that are over on the debate that Marcus did with Mr. Fight the Flat Earth, Craig. And in the comment section, we're noticing that these people are in there claiming that you can see all of the equipment still left by Apollo through a telescope from your backyard. Yep. Or from a telescope at an observatory. Doesn't matter. The point is you can't.
You can't see it. Even the Hubble Space Telescope cannot see it. That has far higher resolution than any backyard telescope.
Boy, did that start a can of worms over there.
Yes.
Yes, that Scottish professor, Bassett, we were talking about him years ago. He did a whole presentation on Hubble, and he said Hubble had to have physically 10 times the size to be able to pick up a few pixels of something on the lunar surface.
It was such a ridiculous statement. I thought, well, there's no point in even responding to it. You know, if you don't know that a telescope can't see the Apollo stuff on the moon, you haven't been studying the subject very much. And obviously,
well, the people in the comments, you can see their level of education. I mean, you can go on and there's lots of people on YouTube that are out there walking around university asking, grade 3 questions and they can't answer it.
Okay, here's the comment that started it all. It was by Danny Ewitz. And he says, it's unbelievable how willfully ignorant people can be. You can observe the evidence of human activity on the moon from Earth. I wrote, I'm sorry to say that you cannot, not even with the giant Magellan telescope in Chile. Look it up. Then this guy Crimson Sausage comes back and he says, you literally can with a home telescope. And I say, oh, no, you cannot with a home telescope, nor with the one in Chile.
That's quite right.
And, oh, my God, 38 replies to this.
Wow. It got some interesting there.
Like I said, that tells you the educational level of the people that are responding. They're not going to go look it up. They wouldn't understand it anyway.
Yes, but they see those man-made shorts and they have the footprints where they start from the Earth, they zoom onto the moon and then zoom on the footprint. And they believe this crap.
Yeah, they think it's real. It's called CGI. No telescope can see anything the size of a pickup truck on the moon. It's too far away. Don't they understand that? Obviously not.
If you look at the people, guy running around a university, and he was walking up and he asked people how intelligent they think they are on a scale of 1 to 10. And they'll say they're an 8 or a 9 or something like that, right? And he says, so what's 3 cubed? And they'll say 9. And then he says, okay, what's 3 times 3 times 3? And they go 9. What's a quarter of an hour? And they say 25 minutes because a quarter is 25. It's just unbelievable.
I mean, the level of ignorance is absolutely outstanding.
When you look at the level of education on a worldwide basis and see what is graduating from high school in the US, it's unbelievable. And that's what you have to understand when we're looking at the comments.